Let me introduce today's speaker, who doesn't need an introduction. His biographical sketch was condensed to one page, which was a challenge in and of itself yesterday afternoon. Pierre Howard has appeared for the Georgia Public Policy Foundation now 4 times more than any other person, and for that we're very grateful. He has had a remarkable career as a state senator and lieutenant governor. He has always operated in a forthright, open, and bipartisan way. As a result of this, Pierre is one of the most liked and most respected politicians that I have ever known. I am proud to call Pierre Howard a friend, and it is a distinct honor, Pierre, to welcome you back and to present you to our audience this morning. Pierre Howard.
Well, thank you so very much, Griff, for those kind words. I am reminded of this preacher that we used to have in my hometown of Decatur when I was growing up. And when he was introduced like that, he would get up and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, let us pray." He would say, "Father, please forgive that man for the excesses of his remarks, and forgive me for enjoying them so much. Amen." To hear Griff say those nice words is very encouraging at a time when some tension has developed between the House and the Senate. I don't know if anybody has noticed that. I was down in Clayton County with Bill Lee about a week ago, and he introduced me this way. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is our Lieutenant Governor. He is a good example of what happens when folks don't vote." I want to start this morning by saying to the members of the General Assembly that I'm looking forward to the session. I'm looking forward to working with you. Some of you are new to the process, and that's great because we do need fresh blood, and we do need you. We need your innovation and your energy, and I hope that you're going to enjoy the process as much as I have in my time at the General Assembly. I want to thank the Public Policy Foundation for the role that you're playing, the very important role that you're playing in our state. And I want to say that I've enjoyed the role that I've played with you. I've had the pleasure of working with you on fundraising. Dates back to the time when Tom Perdue was here running the Public Policy Foundation, and I've had a great relationship for a long time with Griff. Griff and I have known each other for about 20 years, I guess. And also Kelly McCutcheon, whose father I've known for a long time. And I just think that the Public Policy Foundation has got some very, very able young people running it. And I think we ought to give them a hand for the great job they're doing with this organization. Let's give them a hand. You know, one of the reasons that I was so interested in the Public Policy Foundation is because there has been a real need for an organization like this in the state. I believe that the battle for the future is going to be won with ideas and with positions on issues more than personalities. And so I feel very strongly a need for an organization like the Public Policy Foundation to develop ideas and to have a think tank, a responsible group of people thinking about the issues and trying to have an influence and impact on state policy. That's exactly what you're doing, and it's working. You're having some effect. I would lift up to you the recent work that you've done on welfare reform. I appreciate the way in which the Public Policy Foundation worked with Michael Thurman, with the governor's office to examine the proposal that was made on welfare reform, the input that the Public Policy Foundation had, and the effort that's been made to support. Once you thought that you could support it and found you could support it, you've gone around the state, and that has been extremely helpful, very valuable. And I think that in the future, there's even going to be a bigger role for the Public Policy Foundation. I want to say to you this morning that I believe the culture of state government is changing. And it may not be changing as fast as you would like for it to, but it's changing. Those of us who have been involved in it for a number of years can feel it and see it. And any of you who run for public office can smell it. I mean, it's palpable that change has come to Georgia. The most obvious, I think, indication of it is the maturing of the process that has made Georgia really a microcosm of the country. If you will look at elections in our state, they pretty much reflect what's going on in America today. We have a good balance now between Democrats and Republicans. I realize that there's some debate about whether the balance is right yet or not, but in this room we could probably get a debate going on that. But we do have a bipartisan state. And I think that has been very good for Georgia. I think it has fostered competition, and competition is good for just about any institution to which you can bring it. So what the competition between the parties has done is to elevate the debate and raise the stakes as far as issues are concerned. What you've seen happen as a result of bipartisanship, which I embraced as far back as 1991 when I was elected lieutenant governor. I had a lot of criticism because of that. I think people in this room are aware of it. I'm not saying that I should be given a pat on the back. I felt that I saw it coming maybe earlier than some other people did. But I've had the honor to appoint a number of very strong committee chairs who are Republicans. I really wish I could have done more in that regard, but that which I've done I'm proud of. Skin Edge, I think, is one of the most useful members of the Senate that we have ever had, and I'm sorry that he's not here to hear me say that, because he knows that I feel that way. Skin and I go back a long way. We're very close, and I really enjoyed working with him in the Senate. Johnny Isaacson, who was an officer at the same time that I was in the same fraternity, and we lived next door to each other in the fraternity house, had the chance to work together, and I'm just so pleased that the governor has appointed him the chairman of the school board of our state. I really believe that Johnny is an example of the kind of person you want to see in state government, because he is willing to listen. And I think that is such an important part of being a good public official, being willing to listen and willing to hear all sides before you make your decision. Then Mike Egan, who now chairs the Special Judiciary Committee and handles a lot of bills in a great way, and also Jim Tysinger. All of those individuals have really done a good job for the Senate. And so I'm proud of the fact that I've been a part of the bipartisanship, and I think that's the way the state needs to be governed in the future. And that's the way I intend to conduct myself for as long as I might have the chance to do so. Another thing that I think you have to look at in terms of the changing culture of state government is the partnership culture that has developed between our state government and the business community. Sam Williams is here, and Sam, I want to congratulate you and tell you how proud all of us at the state capitol were to see that decision made, because we value the work that you have already done and will do in the future with us. And we need a strong partnership ethic between business and government. I'm a big believer that we can't get anything valuable done in this state without buy-in from the business community. And that includes education, it includes crime, it includes, and especially includes the environment. And I believe that we can move forward together, but we must move forward together. That was not always true. When I first was elected to the General Assembly, I believe that most of the business lobbyists who are here will tell you that business was always sort of playing catch-up, because they would react to what government did. And today there's more of a tendency to see these things done in tandem, and I think that's very important. I also believe that the move toward privatization is an indication of a new culture in state government. We do a lot of things in state government that the private sector can do better and should do. And I believe that the governor has been very serious about it. I believe the General Assembly is serious about privatization, and that in the future, that future governors will be forced to follow what has already started. You cannot turn back and turn away from the movement toward privatization. In a minute I'll talk about prisons, but that's one way that we can hold down the cost of building prisons, is to privatize them. We already have one in Irwin County, and we're in the process of putting 2 more prisons in the budget right now. They're both going to go in South Georgia, one in Nichols and one in Alamo, and both of those will be privatized. And then we're going to build one, if I have anything to do with it, in Charlton County, which will be privatized as well. So we're going to be bringing online about 4,000 more prison beds. The other thing that I want to just point out to you, I realize that probably we haven't done as much in this area as we might want to do, but we have cut taxes twice in the last 4 years, in the last 6 years. And I think that is an indication of a new culture in state government. About $700 million in tax cuts. And I realize the tax cuts that we chose were not tax cuts that people in this room are going to immediately feel deep in their pocket, because it was the intangible tax, it was a general tax in a general cut in your Georgia taxes, which you didn't feel too much, and taking the tax off of food, which you didn't feel too much. But the main thing that I think you got to look at when you look at tax cuts is the direction we're going. And $700 million overall is a pretty good start at getting things going in the right direction. So I think that is important. I also feel that the efforts at redirection to require every single Department of State government to look at their budget every year and to take a percentage, right now it's 5%, and of things that may not be as high a priority, and redirect them toward things that are higher priorities. So things are changing at the state capitol, and there's still things that need to happen. One thing that has, I was going to use the word irked, but I guess it would be better to say disappointed me, is the difficulty that I've had in getting some of my initiatives passed through the whole General Assembly. We had the 2/3 vote for a tax increase, which passed the Senate. It never became law. Term limits for members of the General Assembly, which passed the Senate, never became law. Abolition of the no contendory plea for drunk driving, passed the Senate, never became law. Zero tolerance for young drivers, same story. And on and on and on. I believe that public pressure is the greatest motivator of people in public office. And I'm hoping that at this session of the General Assembly that pressure will be brought to bear by the public on some of these issues, particularly the young drivers issue, which Senator Jack Hill, who's sitting right down here in front of me, from Reevesville, Georgia, led the charge when we established a study committee last spring, and on the issue of young drivers, that we all know that young drivers are dying at 4 times the rate of adult drivers, and the reason is that they do not have the experience required to make them careful drivers. They also maybe look at it a little different than we do, being invincible as they are when they're young in their minds. But Jack and I believe, and the governor has embraced this idea very strongly, which I'm glad of, we believe that we must act on behalf of our children. And all of you in this room are either parents or aunts and uncles or grandparents or something. You have connection with children, and you know how I feel about it as a parent. You know from your own experience how you feel about your children and your family who are getting ready to get out there on the road, and how frightening it is because of the large number of drunk drivers who are out there. I believe that this is the session where we need to act to protect our children, and I'm hoping that the public pressure will be brought that is sufficient to cause that to happen at this session of the General Assembly. I want to talk for a minute about education, because I have appreciated very much the efforts of the Public Policy Foundation to move in the area of education. I believe that what the governor said in his speech the other day is true, that education is everything. It's the answer. I mean, everybody in the room knows it. Every politician says it, regardless of their party or what office they're running for. They always say that education is the key. It is the key. But what are we doing to make sure that we advance? Well, we're getting some good news. Things are better than they were. But things aren't, it's like, thank God things are not what they used to be, but they ain't what they ought to be. That's kind of the way I feel about education. We have made some strides, and I won't go over all of that because you're familiar with the initiatives that are being made. What is the next step? That's what we've got to think about. What's the next step to take us to the next level in education? Let me give you a little bit of my experience. Again, I have to speak from my experience because that's all I've got. Nancy and I have got 2 children in Kathy Ash's district, and they go to Morris Brandon School, which is reputedly one of the better schools in Georgia. It is a good school. We're happy with it. We have liked it. Christopher is in the 5th grade and Caroline is in the 4th grade. But I want to just give you an example of what I think needs to happen to make the schools better. First of all, not too long ago, they decided, I say they decided, it's hard to figure out who decides, but it was decided, and that's one of the problems. It was decided that on Mondays, Christopher would no longer have math, but would have PE and music instead of math. So his math has been reduced from 5 days to 4 days. Okay. Now, when you, as a parent, say to your spouse, that's not good. We don't think that's a good decision. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you don't think it's a good decision. So then you start trying to figure out what you can do about that. And you go down and you talk to the principal and you say, we do not feel that it's in our child's best interest to have music and PE, as important as they are. We do have a piano in our house, but anyway, we do think music is important, but we think that math is core curriculum. We think that core curriculum has got to come first. And what they do is they look at you and say, we're sorry, but we're just going by the rules that they've set for us downtown. This is what we have to do. And you feel powerless. You feel that there's nothing you can do about it. Teachers whom I know at that school will tell you that they do not have enough time to teach the core curriculum. They don't feel they have enough time on task with their students. And these are the kinds of things that parents worry about. Now, I'm not being critical of the teachers because the teachers will tell you the same thing if you will talk to them. They're frustrated too. And I'm not necessarily being critical of the principal because the principal has to follow directions. I think the way we can overcome this is to strengthen the charter school law for our state. If you will look at the statement that was written by someone in this organization, and it could have been Lou Ann, a beer line. Is she here this morning? Well, she wrote a very good issue analysis on how to improve Georgia's charter school law. I was a supporter of the charter school law that passed in 1993. But sadly, the charter school law which passed in 1993 has not produced the results that we would have hoped for because we only have, I think it's 6 charter schools which have been approved. I think 3 are in Bartow County and 3 in Cobb County. And it's good to have 6, but that's not enough. We need more. And I believe that the statement that was written on the need is worth my reading to you. It's very brief. Let me read this to you. The Governor and the General Assembly have recognized that our education system needs reform and that we must develop new and innovative ideas for change. While our public schools must be supported, simply tweaking the old system will not do. Accordingly, the General Assembly passed charter school legislation in 1993. This legislation has not accomplished its purpose of providing a fertile field for the development of charter schools in this state. Very few applications have been received, and thus few charters granted. The primary reason for the lack of applications is that our current charter school law restricts charter applications to existing public schools. In other words, under our current laws, parents, innovative teachers, community leaders, and businesses cannot work with their local school board to create a new model for public education in the community. Our current statute is more accurately described as a reconstitution statute, allowing existing public schools to be reconstituted as charter schools. And then she goes on to say that what we need is a stronger charter school law. A bill has been introduced by a very close personal friend of mine from the University of Georgia. That's Clay Land, a Republican senator from down in Columbus. It's been signed on by Jack Hill, a Democrat. It's been signed on by David Scott, a Democrat, and it's been signed on by several other Republicans, and I apologize for not having their names in my mind right now. But it's a bipartisan bill. I have not signed on to the bill per se at this point, but I want to tell you that I will pledge to you that I want to work to get a bill, and to get a bill that meets these requirements, that it will give parents more input into the process, that it will give parents more control over the process, so that a parent like me who has a concern will have a way to have it addressed at the school. I believe that if we turn the parents and the teachers loose to innovate and to do new things and make new approaches and think outside the box, I think we're going to get better results. And so that's what I'm going to be working on. Another point I want to make to you is crime. I'll be brief on this. There are a couple of proposals on the table right now on crime. They both have value. One is a proposal that's been made by the Attorney General, a very good man, to require 85% of the sentence to be served. Another proposal of mine is that we follow the North Carolina model, and we require the convicted person to serve the sentence of the court, and that we have a sentencing commission to try to look at the sentencing patterns in the state and make them more uniform, to restrict the discretion of the judge more, so that you don't have 1 to 20. What's happening right now in Georgia is that you'll have someone commit an offense in County A, and let's say it's, I saw one the other day, an actual case where a 19-year-old young man stole $60 worth of equipment out of a shed, and the equipment was recovered, and he got 15 years to serve. He's 19. He had 3 misdemeanor convictions prior. Well, now that sentence is pretty far outside of the norm, and the same offense in most counties would not carry a 15-year to serve sentence. So you have great disparity in sentencing today in Georgia, and that is viewed as unfair. You also have the very terribly undermining practice of judges having to give sentences which are unrealistically long in order to get the person to serve the amount of time they feel should be served. So you've got a charade going on every day at the courthouse. It happens every day in every courthouse in this state. And I would say in a lot of states in this country the same thing is going on. North Carolina's answer, I think, is very good. And their answer has been received. It was initially a little bit controversial, but after looking at it and studying it, almost everyone from both parties and on all sides of the spectrum have bought into it, kind of like the welfare reform thing. It is viewed as a good way to go. North Carolina has got a lot of similarities to Georgia. 35,000 prisoners, we've got 35,000 prisoners, but they are requiring their prisoners to serve the sentence of the court. Now, what does that do for you? It brings back credibility to the system. It makes people believe once again that the system means business. It is a deterrent to crime. Crime is down in North Carolina since this law came into effect. And I could talk longer about it, but I really believe that it's time for us to reform the criminal justice system in the state. It's time for us to have the debate. It's time for us to be serious about it. It's time for us to stop throwing up roadblocks and making excuses. It's time for us to move. And I believe that if the business community will buy into a solution, It may be that, that you're not going to buy into my solution. But let's find a solution that we can go forward with, and let's get on with it, because what we've got now is a system that's not working. It's not the judge's fault, it's not the lawyer's fault, it's not the DA's fault, it's the fault of those of us who made the system in which they're working, and we've got to change the system. I want you to know that I take great relish in doing this job. I like it, I enjoy it, and I want you to know that I'm going to try to do the very best I can every day that I'm in it. I know there are a number of lieutenant governors out here in the audience. I don't know how many lieutenant governors there are out here. I know there's several anyway. And it's a good job. It's not an easy job, but it's a good job. And I have enjoyed doing it. And I hope that I'm doing the kind of job you want me to do. I'll make every effort to continue to do that for as long as I have the job. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Yes, sir.
At Grady Hospital, which is a state-funded facility, we spent $156 million last year. There's a very delicate problem of racial discrimination, extreme racial discrimination that is reversed. Their contract evaluation, which they publish, states that a minority has a plus of 30%. And an additional 30% if they use minority employees in the contract. So that's 60%. How do you feel about something as extreme as that? We're all sympathetic to the plight of the minority, and we want to help them in every way possible. But I wonder if we've gone too far and perhaps beyond the law.
Well, I don't believe in quotas. I do believe in fairness, but I don't believe in quotas. And I think that Chairman Skandalakis has recently discussed that issue at some length. But I don't think quotas are useful, because I think they probably cause more harm than good in a real sense. And so that's the way I feel about it. I haven't seen a legislative proposal to address it, but that's my feeling. Question? Yes, sir. Kelly?
We discussed welfare reform. What is your prognosis as what's going to happen to Governor Miller's legislation as it goes through the legislative process? Will it be derailed? Will it have a good chance of being passed? Will we have to make some concessions? Or will it basically pass?
I don't think that it's going to have that much trouble, because I think the consensus building that's been done, and you have been a part of that, has got a lot of momentum behind it. There might be a little change made here or there. There always is in the legislature, but I think that in general it'll fare well. Yes, sir.
Would you support a bill modeled on California's Proposition 209 for Georgia?
Well, I haven't ever read 209, and I know generally what it says, but I don't too easily adopt California solutions. We don't, let me discuss that for a minute. I don't want you to think I'm dodging that question. We don't have anything near like what they've got in California here in the state. And I want to just tell you something. You know, there's been a lot said about admissions to the universities. Let me tell you what we do today. We don't have a double standard anymore in admissions in Georgia. What we've got is this, and I can only speak to the University of Georgia because that's the one I've looked at. And I think you've got to decide whether this is something you can live with or not. What they do is they admit 2/3 of the students based on scores. It's 1190 on the College Board, and it's 3.6 grade point average. If you don't have those scores, you don't get in. It's pretty good. I mean, that's a lot better than it was. I probably couldn't get in today, you know. But that's the deal. For the other 1/3 of the students, they have got a formula which the admissions committee developed, and admissions office, or whoever it was at the admissions office over there developed this formula. It's got 15 points in it for which you get credit. One of the points in there is if you're the son or daughter of an alumnus of the University of Georgia, you get 1 point. If you come from South Georgia, you get 1 point. You say, why? Well, because they're trying to encourage, so many of the prospective students today live in the metro area. They're trying to encourage students from rural areas to come, so they give them a point for being from South Georgia. If you have participated in a lot of community activities as a student, you get a point or half a point or something. Anyway, there are all of these little things that they give you credit for. And one of the points in there is ethnicity. That would include being African American. It would include being any race besides Caucasian, which is the majority race in the state. It comprises about 15% of the entire consideration for any student. It's not a majority of the consideration. So that's what we've got today in the state. There is some consideration of that given. Since that went into effect, the student body at the University of Georgia has dropped from 11% minority to 7% minority. If we eliminated that element that I just described in the admissions process, the minority population of the student body would drop from 7% to 4%. Now, I think people like you need to think about whether that would be good or bad. We've got 30% minorities, and I'm all for fairness. I mean, my children are going to have to go through this process. Very likely they'll go to the University of Georgia if they can get in. But I don't have any problem with that myself. And I think you've got to decide whether you have a problem with it. That's basically what we're talking about today in Georgia. Question? Yes, sir. Well, to be honest with you, there's not a whole lot we can do in the short term. We are requiring inspections of cars in a larger number of counties, which I think, I know it's unpopular in the counties where you require it, but I think it's very important because most of those cars come into the Atlanta area, and it never made any sense to me to inspect DeKalb, Fulton, and Cobb or whatever it was, and not some of the other metro counties if you're going to really do anything about clean air. One of the problems with clean air, a senator told me, I'm not going to say which one, but a senator who's I think a very good senator, a very smart guy, made the comment to me. He said, I can understand this thing about the water because I have to drink it. I can see if water's dirty, and we've got to do something about water. But this air thing, I think they're overdoing. You can't palpably see the problem unless you get up on Kennesaw Mountain and look back at the city. Then you can see it. But I believe more people are beginning to realize that it's a very serious problem. I mean, it's come home to roost now with the development. And I heard Sam Welborn, another one of my fraternity brothers who's just been elected for the second time to the Transportation Board from the 3rd District, say in his acceptance speech to the 3rd District delegation that he's very much interested in trying to get some trains in Georgia to move people instead of cars. Now, that's an easy thing to say, and I'm all for that. I believe that we need to get commuter spurs going out to Columbus and Macon and Athens and even into Cobb. And I'm not talking about another MARTA system. I'm talking about commuter rail. And I think that would be very helpful. The problem is, how are you going to pay for it? It is very expensive. And we've learned from trying to run MARTA that heavy rail, it costs a lot of money to put it in, it costs a lot of money to maintain it, and you're talking about taxes when you talk, because we don't have the money right now to afford it. And if the federal government's cutting back and we're cutting back, then where's the money going to come from to run a rail system? But that would have more of an effect than anything that I know of. I guess, I don't know how much time you've got Griff?
On this prison keeping prisoners incarcerated for 100% of their sentences,
Yeah.
can we afford that?
Okay, let me talk to you about affording. He wants to know, can we afford to keep the prisoners in for 100% of their sentences? The way they did it in North Carolina is that they had a sentencing commission. And the sentencing commission was composed of business people, judges, DAs, sheriffs, people knowledgeable in the area. And what they did was to work out a proposed sentence for each offense, first, second, third offense, habitual offender, that reduces the amount of discretion that the court has. For example, I remember on the grid, the first time you forge a check, it was 4 to 6 months in jail. And the judge could give you 4 months, but if you were not a good prisoner, you could have to be required to serve the 5th and the 6th month. Or he could just give you the whole thing, or she, 6 months, and you'd have to serve all of it. Now, what would that do? First of all, most of the calculations that say we can't afford it, quote unquote, come from current sentencing patterns, which I have already said, and you know are unrealistically long because the judge is doing a guessing game saying, okay, if I give him 10 years, then he'll serve 2.5. So that's where these cost estimates are coming from. In talking with the Attorney General last week about this whole issue, he was estimating that the proposal he's got on the table for 85% under current patterns would cost between $1 and $2 billion, and that to cut the budget an equivalent amount in all the different departments to pay for it. So I mean, I think yes, we can afford it. What I like to say to people who ask me that question, I wouldn't say it to you because it would seem impertinent because I know where you're coming from. But my answer is, can we afford not to do it? You know, there's some pretty good studies out there that show that people, I'm a believer that a small number of bad people are committing most of the crime, that most people in this society, regardless of their color or their educational background or anything else, are good, decent, God-fearing people who will obey the law. And there are a small number of bad folks. And the longer you keep them locked up, the less it's going to cost society. Because the recidivism rate is so high that when you let people out, they go right back out and start stealing again. It just costs you more. So I think we can't afford to continue what we're doing. And so I think if we can put a man on the moon, we ought to be able to figure out how to get our jails straightened out so they work. Thank you.